sir?
I'm doing well.
I am doing great. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to come to the Pro Stock Motorcycle School with us here.
It's an exciting place to be. St. Louis is an awesome venue. Jerry won his first race here. I don't know if many people know that, but so we're excited to be back here. Hopefully, we're our third one row. It'll be really cool.
Never won 2 in a row before, so obviously never won 3 in a row. Getting hot at the right time, right? Coming right into the countdown of the championship. Obviously winning Indy and going to Reading and doing what you did is even huger. Huger.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about our program. I think I'm the common denominator in the heat, but we just seem to really excel come the heat, and I really can't put my finger on it, but races like Gainesville and Charlotte early in the year, we kind of struggled, and then as the year went on and the countdown came, we just did a little better job.
So does that mean what we're looking at now, mid-80s for the weekend? A lot of humidity out there. That's going to be, you think it's an advantage for you?
I don't know. I mean, we'll kind of see how things pan out. It's really dry here compared to Reading, and so there'll be some adjustments made for that.
I was showing like 92 water grains.
No, my meter. Not compared to Reading.
Well, there you go. We got the expert right here.
Hey, I wonder if you need a job, man, because we need some.
I think this guy knows what he's talking about.
Look who came to Pro Stock Motorcycle School. Your rider wants to know what you're going to do for him. Hey, let's start with the basics. You guys run a Suzuki. 4 cylinders, how many cubic inches?
113 cubic inches.
The V-twins are 160 cubic inches. Obviously, they're 2 cylinders, but 5+ inch bore. Great big stroke. They're torque monsters, a whole lot less RPM. You rely on 14,000 RPM screaming, right?
Yeah, we do.
Why is that an advantage?
It's not.
But the last couple of races, it sure looked like it was.
The bottom line is we have to do a really good job managing the 8th mile. They're probably going to be 100 to 2.5 hundredths faster than us in the back. So what we're trying to do is get that 100 to 2.5 hundredths up, make it up in the first 8th mile. If we could do that, and our driver does a really good job, which he's been doing, we could probably cross the finish line first.
Now, with a little bit less torque and with all the RPM, the Suzukis are also less forgiving if you miss a shift, right? It's more critical to be right on time with a button on the shift light.
So I think that because the V-twins make a lot of torque, they are a little bit more forgiving, and torque is what accelerates our vehicle, right? Not horsepower. So because they make so much torque, they are a little bit more forgiving than the Suzukis. The drivers on the Suzukis really have to be on their game, on point, and they have to really, it's kind of tough. It's within like 100 RPM plus or minus of the program shift point.
All right, let's walk you through what you do to the bike as conditions change. You talked about the fact that Reading, it was a little bit cooler, maybe not quite as much humidity, at least on my meter anyway, but the horsepower numbers were certainly higher in Reading than they're going to be here. That is kind of a fixed number, right? You look at the weather, you realize this is what we've got. What do you now do to the motorcycle to take advantage of the fact that you're not going to have quite as much horsepower? How can you crutch that?
So there's a couple different departments we address. One is, the water, and we make changes to ignition timing and fuel based on water, and we make changes to gear ratio based on our environment and what it's giving us. So we're kind of trying to trick the engine to think it's got as much torque as it did at those other altitudes. Gear ratio is just a torque multiplier, right?
Right.
So we want to make sure that it thinks it's got that same torque. We're not going to run the ET we ran in Reading because it's just a faster racetrack, but we can accelerate our vehicle the quickest way possible in this environment.
Now let me ask you about this. Obviously, the wind. It's a kind of a crosswind, down track a little bit. That's going to have an effect on your rider. What can you do to the motorcycle as a tuner to try to help him deal with the wind?
Yeah, I stand on the starting line and I'm like, boy, I hope this works out for you, Jerry. I don't know, buddy. That's a handful down there, Bubba. Them grandstands in before the finish line, so you're not really sheltered, but he does a really good job with it. What we try and do is build chassis that are really, they pay a lot of attention to the driver input. So the drivers steer the motorcycle with their feet, like they lean on one foot peg or the other one depending on which way they want to go. And the more sensitive we can make the chassis to the driver's input, the more competitive we'll be in environments like this.
Have you got enough wind out there? Maybe around a little bit, change the alignment on the back of the bike to try to compensate? I know that sometimes they do that.
Some motorcycle teams do that, and that hasn't really been something we've had to do to get to the finish line in the middle of the lane.
So you keep the alignment the same. Do you maybe line them up a little bit to the left so that the wind will push him back towards the center?
It's kind of taken the long way around, and I mean, Jerry and Karen both have done a really good job just getting to the other end. I think we have a motorcycle that really pays a lot of attention to the rider's position and what they're doing. So, like, some people don't really think about this, but this vehicle is 600 pounds, right? And the driver is 140, 150 pounds.
Right.
I mean, you're talking a big percentage of the total vehicle weight.
Karen wants you to know that she does not weigh 140 pounds.
No, she doesn't. She's a lot less, so she has a little bit less influence than Jerry.
Gianna wants you to know she does not weigh 140 pounds.
No.
Man, are you in trouble? I didn't think one guy could get in as much trouble with all the girl riders in the class as Steve Johnson. I think you just did.
That's a really good point, Alex. I got some sucking up to do.
So what do? You just basically, I mean, you said, tell Jerry best of luck. Is there anything you can do to help him deal with the wind?
We can. I mean, we can do certain things. We can point him into the wind a little bit. We can, we can move the wheel a little bit, which we don't like doing because when the front wheel is in the air, the rear wheel is really your front wheel. So if you move the rear wheel a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right to compensate, in the first 60 feet it starts driving the bike that direction. Then when the front wheel sets down, now the rear wheel is trying to drive around the front, whichever way you pointed it. So it kind of creates this, it's a double-edged sword depending on how you move it. Our chassis tend to be really particular about where the rear wheel is, so we don't have to make huge adjustments to get big results on the other end.
All right, so you haven't made chassis adjustments in that sense. What have you adjusted since you left riding for Q1 here? You mentioned fuel, you mentioned timing. What else are you doing to the motorcycle?
We'll probably work on the clutch a little bit and see what's going on with the racetrack, what the grip numbers are like. So we have a guy that helps us and he gives us a grip number of the racetrack. And those numbers relate right back to how much power we're going to put to the ground and what kind of clutch setup we're going to run. So those three things kind of make up our first gear launch setup.
Anybody have a question you want to ask Tim about anything involved with the Pro Stock Motorcycle, the guy that's won the last couple of races out here? Let me ask you this. The last couple of races, Friday and Saturday, you've been okay. Sunday, you really look like you came to life. Now, is that strictly weather, or are you maybe doing a little experimenting? Because I know you're probably more of a mad scientist than most people in the motorcycle pits.
Well,
I got the smirk.
no, there's been some talk around about that. You bring up a good point. We've been called everything from sandbaggers to all kinds of other names. But the bottom line is, unfortunately, I'm slow. I'm a little slow to kind of put a whole package together. Okay, so when we come here for Q1, there's a strategy to figure out a certain part of the racetrack, and there's a strategy to figure out the back half of the racetrack. And so Q1 and Q2 are kind of moving strategies around, and then Q3 and Q4 are executing on what we learned with Q1 and Q2. So if you look, typically, we're pretty good in comparison to the field in Q3 and Q4, but typically those are like really hot sessions, so it doesn't move us up a whole bunch in qualifying positions.
Does it change your strategy any now that we're in the countdown to the championship and now that you have achieved legitimate contender status? Do you have to get maybe more conservative? Do you have to race a little defensively? Do you change the way you're going to approach?
That's a good question, and we're talking.
I'm thinking little qualifying points that are out there.
Right now we're talking about little points versus wins on race day, right? So I would sacrifice going rounds on Sunday for 3 little points, and that's just not something we're ready to do. The risk and reward there doesn't pay out for us. What we want to do is figure out the best way to go rounds on Sunday, and that's kind of what we know to do.
Okay, so if you toss a runaway in Friday or Saturday, and if you end up 6th in the field or 10th in the field, you don't care as long as you found your comfort zone going into Sunday.
I mean, I wouldn't even say toss a runaway. These are all like things we're learning every single time we make a run. So when we sometimes we figure out what not to do. You know, we do a lot of that.
I know when I was in the Pro Stock world, it always seemed like it was a whole lot easier to lose 100 horsepower than it was to find 30. And, you know, the old, this never works, let's try it one more time. There's a lot of that going on too, right?
You hadn't tried everything, because if you did, it'd be working right now.
Somebody told me one time that the smartest guy in the pits is the guy that knows the most stuff that won't work.
I'm almost there.
There's a little truth there, though, right?
Yeah,
I mean, you got to go out there sometimes and just prove to yourself.
Yeah, you're right.
Question for Tim? Anybody? Somebody's got to have a Pro Stock Motorcycle question? Yes, sir.
Can you explain how the clutch engagement works? Is it delay so long?
That's a great question. Explain how the clutch engagement works, because when Jerry drops it, it cannot lock up immediately. How does a clutch work on one?
Stages of clutch. One is the static, and then we have 3 other stages of lockup that are engaged. The static is just the spring pressure, and then as the vehicle accelerates and engine RPM picks up, those 3 other stages come in. Typically, we're moving those 3 other stages. The static makes up about, like a third of the total plate load that is applied. So it's not too much, like when we make a change to static, it doesn't make that big of a difference. But if we want to change how the bike launches or something like that, or like the clutch engagement right there on the hit, we pretty much work on the weights on the arms, the lockup.
So you've got spring load on the plate that initially. At what point, what RPM do you have to get before their lockup starts coming in? Because it's half spring, half centrifugal.
We think we pretty much know that the lockup is a part of the launch because the bike's not going to move with the little bit of static we run. So it has to be. Back in the old days, we used to run a clutch called a Snowflake. It was an MTC Generation 1 clutch, and it was a wheel RPM clutch. So when you let go of the lever, whatever you had for static is what moved the motorcycle, okay? And then when the wheel developed some speed, it eventually started locking up the clutch. Well, we know that it took at least like 200 and, I don't know, like 160 to 200 pounds to get the bike to move. And we run a lot less static than that in our clutches. So we know without at least 160 pounds of plate load, the bike's not gonna move. So we think that somewhat of a part of the lockup is playing a role in getting the bike to move initially.
Now, in the Pro Stock cars, when they make the gear shift, they want the clutch to break loose a little bit to keep it from spinning the tire. Is that the same in a motorcycle?
It is, but we run as much clutch as we possibly can because the more the clutch slips, the less we're accelerating our vehicle. So we just kind of, that's another thing we're constantly doing is seeing what the track can hold early with the clutch, and we just keep stacking it on.
How much RPM drop do you see when he hits the shift button? You're 14,000 what?
Yeah, like on the 1.2 it drops to about 11.
Okay.
And then 11.5, and then they get tighter and tighter and tighter as you go down the racetrack.
Well, as the gear splits get a little bit smaller and smaller, right?
They do, yep. Yeah, they do. So but on Pro Stock cars, that's a little bit different. So that's why I mentioned that. Pro Stock cars, they pull it down to a certain number, and they let the vehicle accelerate from that number. And V-twins have that torque at a higher range, and so I think you can do that. But with the inline fours, we're really counting on a lot of inertia and moving parts, so we try and keep the RPM up a little higher.
Awesome. Anybody else have a question? That answer your question? Anybody else have a question you want to ask Tim?
All right.
You know what?
Guys.
It's about time to start the autograph session. I know you got to go get the motorcycle ready for qualifying session number 1.
Woo.
Tim Kulungian, folks, took time out of his schedule to
Thank
come.
you very much.
Chit-chat with us. I really do appreciate it. Best of luck this weekend as they go for 3 in a row. Pro Stock motorcycle fans are going to get set up for the autograph session right over here in just a couple of minutes. Great place to grab autographs from all your favorite Pro Stock motorcycles.
That guy knows what he's talking about.
Shopping.
That was a thing or two.
That was a corn dog. That was the Gateway corn dog.
Ranked out of 16 tracks, probably number 11.
Okay.
10, number 11.
Not good. That's not good.
When in Dallas they make fresh ones. You see them dip it.
Oh yeah?
They fry it there, right in front of you.
Really?
This looked like it'll sit underneath the heat lamp for a while.
Yeah.
Favorite track food though? In Pomona, they have a pork chop. And it's pork chop on a stick. And it's about this big around, about that thick.
Wow.
And it is.
Well, as far as the media is concerned, Englishtown used to have the best track food because they had all this great Jersey Italian food.
Indy's got the best track food because we cook most of the time.
Well, right, but I mean in terms of what they serve the media at the thing. But yeah, absolutely.
Now that will be.
I made a pot of red beans. I don't know if anybody cares about this. Do you all care about red beans? I made a pot of red beans. I'm talking to Corey Savoie, by the way. This is Jerry Savoie's brother. And I made a pot of red beans that are just unbelievable.
Now, you didn't use canned red beans.
Huh?
You didn't use canned red beans.
Oh, exactly. Exactly. I soaked my beans overnight.
Soak overnight.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Now, what'd you use? You use sausage, you use salt.
I used some andouille sausage. I didn't use tassel ham. I used the big ham. My sister throws away spiral cut ham hocks like they're going out of business, and there's a huge amount of ham on it. I'm like, you can't throw that away. I better skip talking about red beans and say hi to the people here. What's up, JT? How you doing?
Hey, Tim, what's up, man?
Not much. Just
Flying Ryan's
seeing the people.
trying to give a little neck tattoo. That's kind of cool. Andy's from Florida, so you got to watch out. She's Florida girl. Here comes Hector Arana Jr. He looks a little puzzled. Like, where is this thing? Hector, we're here, dude. We're over here.
Sorry. Hey, Andy.
Oh, Hector, you probably need to go over here.
Hello, Natalie. How are you?
How are you, Tim? It's good to see
Fabulous.
you.
some fabulous.
Andrew, that you know I don't have that kind of wit. That steamy wit.
You can judge a racer by the size of their hero card.
That's a good call, sir. We put them all by the size of their hero cards together. Oh, we're still sliding. Wow, we got Hector Senior here too. Look
I
out.
talked to Dave Conforti. It sounds like your bike's going to be at PRI.
Well, that's what we're hoping for, right?
All right. He told me to tell you that.
Hey, Angel.
Sounds good to me.
I saw you got that cat.
Some time for my bearing order too.
You know that set a bad precedent, right? You didn't win, and you still got a cat.
Sadie, how are you?
Hi.